Hello everyone. So this is not the best room to be making videos in, but I was editing my video and I guess that new microphone I got is on the fritz and everything was so staticky that it was unpleasant to listen to, and I'm just not going to do that to you guys. So we're back to the old setup, and it looks like everything is working, so we're going to try this again. This is probably going to be a shorter video than it would otherwise be, but at least you guys aren't going to have to listen to 30 minutes of static, so that's nice. So this chapter is going to be chapter 5, the redevelopment / reinsurance and security phases. And this is the age range from 40 to 50. And this is all stuff that I have not yet experienced, so I don't really know what this is going to be like. I suppose I could say looking forward to it. I don't know what this is going to be like for me in my life, and so hopefully it's not as difficult as it is in this book for a lot of these women. Like, I've noticed that this book here, especially this like first half, yes, it's a good warning to men about what women are like and how women can behave, and it kind of gives men an idea of the pitfalls that they might have to encounter when they're dealing with women. But it also is a wonderful step-by-step process for women. Here are all the choices in life that you don't want to make if you want to be happy, because these are all choices that are regrettable in their nature. So this is a continuation of those choices. There's not a guy in the world who committed to monogamy with a woman who didn't think she was a quality when he decided to commit to her. Even if she was a clinical neurotic before he hooked up with her, she still had other redeeming qualities that made her worth the effort. It's only afterwards, when the world he built up around his idealization of her comes crashing down in flames, that she really wasn't a quality woman after all. And this is something to note. Like, a lot of people, even if they have a very dim view of marriage, when they decide they want to get married, all of a sudden they're like, oh, it's going to be wonderful. They don't realize that it's entirely possible for their marriage to dissolve too. For any marriage, technically, to dissolve. Just because you feel good about it, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be cautious. The more an alpha man actualizes his sexual market value potential through maintained or improved looks, career, maturity, affluence, status, etc., the more a woman's need for enduring security becomes threatened as her sexual market value consistently decays in comparison to his. He talks about women who become very domineering in their 40s, and they kind of try to exert power over men, and it's just interesting to me. Like, I don't see myself going down that road. Like, I think my husband and I have already built up our dynamic, and it seems pretty solid. But then again, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to have much insecurity as our relationship goes on and as I age and become less pretty. Maybe I will. Maybe at some point it will really hit me that I'm not as pretty as I used to be. But I think that we've built enough security in the relationship just around the relationship itself. It's not just based off of the fact that I'm pretty and he finds me attractive. It's based off of the fact that I'm good company to him and he finds it enjoyable to have me around. And so, eventually I'm going to be considerably less pretty. I'm already less pretty than I was 10 years ago, and we've been together for 10 years now. But eventually, it doesn't necessarily matter, because we still have the kind of relationship that we've built up together. So I don't know if I'm going to go through this part. I might. We'll see. The redevelopment phase can either be a time of relational turmoil or one of a woman reconciling her hypergamous balance with the man she's paired with. The security side of this hypergamous balance has been established with her long-term satisfaction, and a new alpha reinterest begins to grate at the ubiquitous, almost too dependable certainty of that security. He's talking, I think, about how either a woman realizes she married a beta in her epiphany phase. She discovered some beta guy. She married him in her epiphany phase. She's starting to realize that he's a little too predictable. She's unhappy. She's dissatisfied. And she has relationship turmoil because of this. Or She starts looking for excuses for him being acceptably alpha to her. She convinces herself. She does the hamstering to make it seem like he is in fact an acceptably alpha man for her. He doesn't really spend much time in this chapter talking about women, at least that I've been able to see, talking about women who married the alpha that they wanted. And so I don't really know what this phase of development is going to be like for me. Maybe it's just going to be pretty smooth sailing because, hey, I already got the alpha and I've got the security, and so I've got everything. Like, I have the everything man. Or it could be a point at which I feel a change in perspective, because I definitely had that at the epiphany phase. There was that altering of perspective, that sense of, oh, okay, so suddenly all this money and providership stuff is actually worth something because I'm flat on my butt and I can't do anything. So maybe it's going to be a point at which in my 40s I'm going to have some sort of change in perspective. But that's kind of what I've been noticing. Instead of scrambling or dashing around to acquire an acceptable mate, to fill whatever role I need a man to fill at that point in my life, it's been more of one long journey of realizing and more fully appreciating the aspects of the man I already have in my life. And so it's going to be interesting. One way or another, it's going to be interesting. There is a fundamental reassessment of the man she's paired with, and how his now realized sexual market value potential has either proved to have been a good bet or a disastrous misstep. And, as with the various prior phases of maturity, she finds there are convenient social conventions already pre-established for her to help justify the decisions she'll make as a result of this reassessment. I've got to say, and this is something Tomassi said a few times that I just kind of want to confirm for you guys. I think, and I'm going to have to paraphrase it because I don't remember his exact words, but the existential fear of women is the idea that they're paired with a man who is not a hypergamous ideal, a man who is less than worthy. And, again, that's me paraphrasing, but I just wanted to let you guys know that is very true. The idea of being with a man who is anything less than a hypergamously satisfactory man is just completely unpalatable to me. And it was when I was single and when I was dating. I didn't like any of the men who were available to me. I kept on doing everything in my power to get a broader and broader dating pool so that I'd have more men to choose from, so that I'd have a better opportunity to find at least one man who measured up to my standards, which might have been ridiculously high for all I know, but that was what I was after. And eventually I did find that man. But the idea of settling with anyone less than that was just always this very grating and unpleasant thing, and I never wanted that. And I'm very, very lucky in the sense that I didn't have to settle for that. But for these women, I can't imagine being 40. I mean, I'm not even 40 yet. I can't imagine being that old, that far beyond the good days, the prime days of sexual market value, and looking at it and saying, okay, I really screwed up here. That would be horrible. And so the fact that women immediately want to get out of that situation makes perfect sense to me. The fact that there are social conventions already pre-established to help her justify any decisions she might make having come to that conclusion, like, oops, I grabbed the wrong one, totally makes sense. That doesn't make it right. It's just incredibly understandable. Again, that doesn't make it right. It's not all doom and gloom, however. Depending upon a woman's degree of self-awareness and realism about her late-stage sexual market value, the decision may simply be one of pragmatism. She understands she's with the man who can now best embody a hypergamic balance for her in the long term. Or she genuinely has a long-term, feminine-defined love and affinity for the man she's paired with, who finally just gets it. I mean, I have a feminine defined by like essentially feminine defined love and affinity for my husband. I mean, I'm a woman, and so I love him, and I can only go by my own definition of love. There is an extent to which my own perception is limited to my own experiences. I do believe that love is pretty darn genuine. There are a lot of guys out there running around going, well, women don't really experience love. It's like, well, at this point, I kind of want to go back to that deep conversion video I did a little while ago. I'll try and leave a link here. We need to go back to that deep conversion video because I do think that I genuinely love my husband, and I think that is a very genuine thing. As far as pragmatism, I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine being dissatisfied with someone in a marital relationship and just going, well, I guess this is the best I can do, and just kind of settling with that. Like, I can't imagine. I really can't. And I'm very happy I don't have to. Regardless of how she comes to it, nothing is more daunting for a woman than to re-enter the sexual marketplace at such a severe disadvantage. After the wall, women dread the idea of having to start over again in a sexual marketplace in which they are grossly outmatched. So even the slightest deviation from the security forever script becomes a major ego threat. This is very true. I can't imagine going back to the dating market. I don't want to have to imagine going back to the dating market. I'm extremely happy that I married a very, very satisfying man when I married him. And it's been good since then. Like, it's just been smooth sailing since then. And the idea of going back out into the sexual market. So say if anything ever happened to him and I found myself a widow, which is pretty much the only way I can see that ever happening. I can't, I looked at it and it was like, at some point, when I was younger, I looked at it and it was like, well, maybe I would date again. Then we had kids and it's like, well, I wouldn't want to be dating as a single mom. Not only is that hard to do, but it's also not so great for the kids, and I wouldn't want to expose them to that. But now I'm past 30, and it's like, would I really want to go out into the sexual marketplace over the age of 30 and try to find somebody? No. No, I mean, I might stumble into someone by accident, but that would be the only way I'd be able to find a good hypergamously pleasing mate. And so, this is it. This is it. I would not go out and date again. I wouldn't want to have to deal with it. And so I'm very happy that that's not something that is really in my foreseeable future. It's important to remind yourself of the distinction that this security isn't necessarily founded on financial provisioning, but rather an emotional, intimate dependence and acceptance for a woman from an acceptably masculine man, often in spite of the past she would rather be, expects to be, forgiven of by virtue of her age and her perceived life experience. I think this is an important thing to take notice of. I see a lot of guys who do this very rigid, very black and white, alpha Fs versus beta bucks kinds of interpretation of things. It's like you're either or, and there isn't a gray area, and if she likes you, it's got to be for one of those things or the other. It can't be for both. And that's not real. That's not realistic at all. Women want the everything man. We want the guy who's got that alpha arousal and attraction. And we also want a guy who's got security. And security isn't always money. In fact, for me at least, it wasn't money at all. I didn't care about money until I hit my 30s and had my epiphany phase. Or, late 20s and had my epiphany phase. Security is a sense of emotional security. Security is a sense of well-being. Security is a sense that he's not going to up and leave you for some other hot chick. Security it's an emotional thing. It's the warm fuzzies you get when you're with the guy. It's the wholesome goodness and the chicken soup for the soul kind of thing. Security is knowing that he's a great dad for your kids, and your kids are in a good, stable home with a good, stable dad. You want that as a woman. Women do want that. The thing is, you have to have it in combination, if at all possible, with that alpha arousal. You've got to have it both. Otherwise, you're going to be perpetually bouncing back and forth between these two things, and that's what he's describing here. And these are two very, very important things that women need. We need to have that sense of security. We need to have a good dad for our kids. But we also need alpha arousal. We need to pair up with the very best genes that we can find. These are two very important things that women seek out. And if we're smart and if we're lucky, we find them when we're in our early 20s, when we're still at our sexual market peak, after we've had enough experience of the world, hopefully after we've had enough experience of the world to get the idea that this is in fact a hypergamously pleasing option. And we grab on for all we're worth and we just hold on tight. And if we do that, then, we can end up in this kind of situation, which is quite lovely. He was never much of a man. Since I started writing on So Suave, and especially more now that I've detailed a societal comfort with an open hypergamy, I've had many guys relate a similar story about how their grandmother, mother, or mother-in-law had just openly told him or his wife that her husband was, quote, never much of a man. These women were all in their late 70s to early 80s, and at that phase of life, all bets are off. What do they really have to lose by letting their daughters and granddaughters in on Grandma's words of warning about settling on a man? This is the part of the chapter that I actually read out in the last video. And the reason I did that is because it's shocking, but it's also very real. There's no part of me that's looking at it and saying, well, I just don't believe this. I totally believe this. Except it's still shocking. I look at these women and it's like, they're out there. I know they're out there, they're out there. These women do exist, where they married some beta guy, they stayed with him until their 70s or 80s, and then, at that point they realize they've really screwed themselves over. I personally cannot imagine spending 40 years of my life in a relationship with someone that I was not attracted to, like genuinely attracted to. Someone that I didn't feel a genuine respect for, a genuine sense of a bond with. I can't imagine that. And I'm afraid that I do know women who have married those beta bucks kinds of guys who are probably headed into this eventuality. And I can't imagine. I feel like they're cheating themselves. They're cheating everybody. They're cheating everyone involved. They're cheating their kids. Can you imagine when your mom, whom you love, says something like this about your dad, whom you love? Like, it cheats her kids. She doesn't ever show... She's never going to have the kind of respect for him, the husband, that she should have for him. And that's something that the kids are going to see. And, kids use the relationship template that their parents provide them later on in life. She's not providing her kids with a good relationship template. She's cheating her husband. Men devote so much to their families. They sacrifice so much for their families. I see the sacrifices my husband makes. They're monumental. And I can't imagine asking those kinds of sacrifices for someone if it wasn't for the good of a family that we had built together, something that was important and valuable to us. Like, you don't ask that of somebody. It's so wrong. And so she's cheated her husband, who deserves to have a loving, respectful wife and didn't get one. She's cheated herself out of a happy relationship for 40 years of her life. Maybe it's happy-ish, but not really. And she's cheated her children out of growing up with parents who actually had a good, solid relationship. Like, this is... And the thing is, it's the woman who does this. The women who make this decision, and not all women make this decision, because I certainly did not. But the women who do make this decision, they're cheating everyone around them. They're cheating the other women who could have settled with that guy and been happy. Like, genuinely happy. They're cheating everybody. And it's just awful. A relief in the hope that they've warned their daughter or granddaughter to opt for monogamy with an exciting alpha lover/husband, no matter how perceptual, rather than the safe bet she made by settling on her plan B man, her beta-dependable husband she conveniently found in her epiphany phase. Well, if there's anything to take away from this, and I know that women hardly ever watch my videos, but if you're a woman watching my videos, if there's anything to take away from this, it's basically that you should live the romance novel life in a way. you should pick out the guy that is not necessarily the bad boy, because I know a lot of girls, I know so many strippers who are like, oh, I love bad boys. It's like, I hate bad boys. They're annoying. But a man who's at least got enough alpha arousal and attraction to be hypergamously pleasing. And you can do that if you're hunting around for one when you're in your early to mid 20s. If you're in your early to mid 20s and you're looking at it and saying, okay, I want to have a guy who's hot and sexy, because that's important. But he also has to be willing to marry me and have kids with me and do all these life things with me, grow old with me. I want that because that's important, and women do want that. And even if you don't feel it when you're like 22, 23, 24, you're still going to want it down the road. And so you still kind of need to plan for it down the road. But if you go looking out for these things and you prioritize finding a husband when you're in your early 20s, instead of just frolicking around and having fun and, constantly finding something better. Okay, is this guy the best I can do? What about this guy? Is he the best I can do? Well, what about this guy? You need to go through that period where you figure out what you can reasonably attain and what you can't. But then you need to settle on somebody, and they need to be hypergamously pleasing. They need to be exciting. I can't imagine spending 40, 50 years of my life in a boring marriage. And somebody just recently told me, like, I shouldn't worry about being bored nearly so much as I should worry about my husband getting bored if he's such an alpha. And it's like, well, that's true. Ideally, neither one of us gets bored. Ideally, we keep things interesting and fresh long enough that we don't get bored. And the thing that's wonderful about that is that the world is an infinitely intricate and interesting and information-heavy place that we can constantly be exploring. There's always something new to take in and process, and we can share that together, that experience of uptaking new information and processing it and learning and growing. If we do that together consistently throughout the years and the decades that go by, number one, we're not going to be one of those couples where it's like, well, we just grew apart after the kids moved out. There's going to be constantly things that we can interact with on. But also, we never get bored. There's just too much to do in one lifetime. And so, I'm not worried about him getting bored with me. And I'm really not worried about getting bored with him. I picked him because he's not a boring man. And I don't intend to ever be bored. So, anyway, that's it for the chapter. I'm still honestly just reeling from the idea of women getting married to not much of a man and then spending like 40 years with him, and then like, this is not what I grew up with. This was not my parents, this was not my grandparents, this wasn't even my in-laws. And so I know it happens. It's just how very terrible. What a horrible waste. What a waste of a lifetime. What a waste of all the potential things that you could do with your life. And again, it goes back to that existential fear of women that they might discover that they've settled down with a man who is not hypergamously optimal. And so it's something, it just weighs on my mind. It's just a thought it's a heavy thought to me. But anyway, I don't know what chapter 6 is. What is chapter 6 going to be? Hierarchies of love, intersexual hierarchies. I have no idea what that's about, but it sounds like it's going to be interesting. I can't wait to read it. And I will see you guys all next week. I hope you guys had a happy Halloween. I forgot to wish you all a happy Halloween last week. And then Halloween happened, like I think it was the next day or something. Anyway, I hope you all had a happy Halloween. And I will see you guys next week.